Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
A few years ago, my partner and I had been saving up to buy our first home. We wanted a place with some land where we could raise our 4 kids and have space for my partner's metal shop. We'd been looking for months when we stumbled across this perfect property. A nice house with plenty of acreage in a quiet neighborhood. The only catch was that it was a bit out of our price range. That's when our friend, let's call her Little Red Hen, came into the picture. She'd been renting a tiny apartment next door and mentioned she'd love to have some land of her own too. We'd known her for a couple years and she seemed nice enough, so we floated the idea of going in on the property together. Little Red Hen was thrilled with the idea. We worked out a deal where my family would live in the house and she'd have use of part of the land. My partner and I would cover the mortgage and house expenses while she'd chip in for her portion of the land. It seemed like the perfect solution. For the first year or so, everything was great. We moved in, got settled, and enjoyed our new home. Little Red Hen would come over occasionally to chat or have dinner, but slowly things started to change. She began showing up uninvited more and more often. At first, it was just a couple of times a week, then almost every day, she'd walk right in without knocking, plop herself down on the couch, and act like she lived there. One day, Little Red Hen burst in excitedly announcing she had brought DVDs for a movie night. When I tried to explain we had plans for a quiet family dinner, she brushed off my concerns, insisting she was practically family and that the kids loved her visits. It was like she was trying to insert herself into every aspect of our lives. She started calling my partner her bestie and would make snide little comments to put me down. Another time, Little Red Hen commented on how exhausted I looked, implying she could juggle work and family more effortlessly. When I explained I was tired from staying up late helping the kids with a school project, she suggested that if I were more organized like her, I wouldn't be so frazzled. It was infuriating, but I tried to bite my tongue to keep the peace. My partner and I started feeling uncomfortable in our own home. We'd whispered to each other after she left, wondering how things had gotten so weird. As the months went on, Little Red Hen's behavior got more and more entitled. She'd help herself to food from our fridge without asking. She'd borrow tools from my partner's shop and return them damaged. She even started disciplining our kids like she was their parent. One day, she yelled at one of our kids for running in the house, threatening to ground them. When I confronted her, saying she had no right to punish our children, she dismissed my concerns, claiming she was just trying to help since we clearly needed it. It was like living with an intrusive, judgmental roommate we never asked for. My partner and I were at our wits' end. We knew we had to get out of this toxic situation, but we were locked into this shared property arrangement. After months of quiet discussions and planning, we decided the best approach was to tell Little Red Hen we wanted to move and see if she'd buy us out. We braced ourselves for drama, but surprisingly, she seemed agreeable at first. When we broached the subject of moving due to the neighborhood getting busier and noisier, Little Red Hen expressed disappointment, but offered to consider buying us out. We explained we'd need to recover our investment plus our share of the equity, and she agreed that was fair, saying she'd look into getting approved for a cash-out refinance. We breathed a sigh of relief thinking this might actually work out smoothly, but of course, that was too good to be true. A couple of weeks later, Little Red Hen came to us with her brilliant plan. She excitedly told us she could get approved for a rental loan, but the house needed to be empty for the appraisal. When we questioned how this would work since we needed the buyout money to move, she casually suggested we could just move all our stuff out temporarily and then move back in while waiting for the loan. Did she seriously expect us to uproot our entire family, move all our belongings, including a full metal shop, and then camp out in an empty house waiting on her loan? The entitlement was staggering. I told her that wouldn't work for us, emphasizing we needed the funds first to be able to move at all. She insisted we'd definitely get the money, urging us to just move out and let her know when we're gone so she could get approved and pay us. When I repeated that this was not happening and we wouldn't move without secured funds, She huffed and complained that we were being difficult about the situation. I had to laugh at the ridiculousness of it all. Here we were, bending over backwards, trying to extract ourselves from this mess, and she had the nerve to call us difficult. In the end, we had to get lawyers involved to force a property sale. Little Red Hen fought us every step of the way, but eventually we were able to sell and split the proceeds. We took a bit of a loss just to be done with it all, but it was worth every penny to be free of her. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw Little Red Hen stamping her foot and yelling as we pulled away. I allowed myself a small smile. Her entitlement and manipulation had cost her what could have been a wonderful, mutually beneficial arrangement. But that was her problem now, not ours. We were moving on to bigger and better things now. Let me start from the beginning. I'm a mother of 3 wonderful kids, twin 5-year-old boys and a 2-year-old girl. Life's been a real challenge since I lost my right hand in a car accident 2 years ago. Learning to manage with a prosthetic while taking care of 3 young children hasn't been easy, but my husband's been my rock through it all. That day we decided to take the kids to the local park. It was a beautiful Saturday afternoon, perfect for some family time. The kids were excited and honestly, I was looking forward to getting out of the house too. We packed some snacks, grabbed the kids' favorite toys, and headed out. When we arrived, the park was bustling with families enjoying the sunshine. We found a nice spot near the playground where we could keep an eye on the kids while they played. My husband spread out our picnic blanket, and I started unpacking our things. That's when I heard a shrill voice behind me. I turned around to see a woman glaring at me, her hands on her hips. She rudely asked what I thought I was doing. Confused, I politely asked if there was a problem. The woman, who I'll call Karen, angrily told me I was in her spot. I looked around, confused, explaining that there were no assigned spots in the park and we had just arrived. Karen insisted that she always sat there and that everyone knew it was her spot. She demanded that we move right away. By this point, my husband had noticed the commotion and came over. He asked if everything was okay. Karen told him that it wasn't and that I needed to move because it was her spot. My husband tried to reason with her, explaining that there were no reserved spots in a public park and that we were just trying to enjoy a day out with our children. Karen rudely replied that she didn't care and demanded we move immediately. When I stood up to try and calm the situation, my prosthetic hand became visible. Karen's eyes widened and then her face twisted into a look of disgust. She made a cruel comment, suggesting that I thought I could take her spot because I was disabled. I felt my face flush with anger and embarrassment. My husband stepped in front of me protectively, telling Karen that she needed to leave us alone. Karen then pretended to back down, saying she'd be the bigger person. She suddenly put on a fake smile and extended her hand towards me, offering a false apology and suggesting we shake hands to forget about the incident. I hesitated, but not wanting to escalate the situation further, I slowly extended my prosthetic hand. As soon as I did, Karen grabbed it and yanked hard. Pain shot through my arm where the prosthetic connected, and I cried out. My husband reacted instantly. He shoved Karen away from me, hard enough that she stumbled backward and fell to the ground. Karen yelled at us, threatening to call the police and accusing my husband of assault. By now, a crowd had gathered. Several people who had witnessed the entire incident stepped forward. One witness spoke up, saying they all saw what happened and that Karen had attacked me first. Another chimed in, pointing out that Karen had pulled on my prosthetic arm and that it was assault. Karen tried to get up and come at us again, but other park-goers held her back. Within minutes, park security arrived, followed shortly by the police. The officers took statements from us and the witnesses. When they heard the full story and saw the red marks on my arm where the prosthetic had been forcibly pulled, they turned to Karen. An officer told her that she was under arrest for assault. Karen protested, claiming she was the victim because my husband had pushed her. The officer explained that multiple witnesses had corroborated that she initiated the physical altercation by pulling on my prosthetic limb. He added that it was assault and given the nature of my disability, it could be classified as a hate crime. When they were leading Karen away in handcuffs, she was screaming about how unfair it all was and how she'd sue everyone. The officer then turned to us and asked if we wanted to press charges. I looked at my husband, and he nodded. After what she'd done, we agreed that she needed to pay for what she did. The officer nodded and asked if I needed medical attention. My arm was sore, but I didn't think anything was seriously damaged. Still, they recommended I get checked out just in case, so an ambulance was called. After I was cleared by the paramedics with just some minor bruising, we decided to head home. The kids were upset that our day out had been cut short, but we promised them we'd come back soon. We later learned that Karen was charged with assault and attempted to plea bargain. However, given the nature of the attack and her clear lack of remorse, the prosecutor didn't offer her much leniency. We did return to the park. It took some time for me to feel comfortable there again, but we refused to let one person's horrible actions rob us of our family outings. Indeed, there are some truly entitled people out there, but there are far more good folks willing to stand up and do the right thing. After graduating with a degree in hospitality management, I bounced around a few corporate gigs before realizing I wanted something more unique. That's when I stumbled upon this quirky little place advertising for a manager. At first, I was hesitant. I mean, anatomically correct waffles? But the owner's enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself drawn to the idea of running such an unconventional spot. It wasn't long before I fell in love with the vibrant atmosphere, the diverse clientele, and yes, even those cheeky waffles. We quickly became known for our laid-back vibe and killer comfort food. Most nights the place was buzzing with laughter and conversation. But about a year ago we started getting these prank calls. At first it was just annoying, but as time went on it started to really get under my skin. It was another busy Friday night when things came to a head. The phone had been ringing off the hook with those damn kids, and I was at my wit's end. Here's how it all went down. I answered the phone with our usual greeting, asking how I could help. The caller, snickering, asked if this was the gay waffle place. I sighed and confirmed that we serve anatomically correct waffles, then tried to interest them in our daily specials. The caller responded with disgust, calling us gross and gay. I explained that our waffles come in all orientations and that we're very inclusive, then asked if they wanted to place an order. The caller laughed, called us freaks, and hung up. I slammed the phone down in frustration. My co-worker Jake looked over with a sympathetic grimace. He asked if it was those brats again. I confirmed it was and expressed my frustration, saying I'd lose it if I had to deal with one more homophobic teenager that night. Jake offered to unplug the phone and I nodded in agreement. Jake yanked the cord from the wall. Of course, that meant all the calls would be forwarded to my cell. Great! As the night wore on, my phone kept buzzing with missed calls. By closing time, I had over 30 notifications. Scrolling through them, I realized I'd missed an important message from our produce supplier. That was the last straw. I told Jake I was done playing nice with these kids. When he asked what I was going to do, I declared I was going to give them a taste of their own medicine. I spent the next hour researching ways to annoy telemarketers, but most of the suggestions were too extreme for kids. Then it hit me. What if I could bombard them with useless information? That's when I stumbled upon King County's Public Information Service. With a wicked grin, I entered the prankster's phone number and signed them up for every possible update. Traffic reports, waste management newsletters, and even wetland conservation. The next day I was wiping down tables when my phone buzzed. It was a text from the prankster's number. They were confused and angry about all the Seattle-related messages they were receiving demanding that I make it stop. I played dumb, saying I didn't know what they were talking about and reminding them this was a chicken and waffle restaurant in Chicago. They insisted they knew it was me and asked again how to make it stop. I continued to feign ignorance, asking if they wanted our delicious waffles to stop, which I said wasn't going to happen. They clarified that they meant the non-stop texts and calls. I pointed out that it must be really annoying, just like how they'd been calling us non-stop for the past year. The pranksters apologized and begged me to make it stop. I refused, telling them I couldn't do that. Instead, I gave them a life lesson about not dishing it out if they can't take it. and sarcastically told them to enjoy learning about Seattle's public transit system. I put my phone away, feeling a sense of satisfaction. Sure, they might keep calling, but at least now they'd understand how irritating it is to be on the receiving end of unwanted communication. Over the next few weeks, we still got the occasional prank call, but they were fewer and farther between. And every time the phone rang, I answered with a smile, knowing that somewhere out there, a group of teenage pranksters was drowning in information about Seattle's wetlands. I went back to focusing on what really mattered, serving up the best damn anatomically correct waffles in Chicago. And if any of those kids ever decide to actually visit our restaurant, well, I'll be sure to give them extra syrup. After all, a little sweetness goes a long way in teaching life lessons. I've been working at this small office for about 4 years now. I started as an entry-level clerk and worked my way up to a junior account manager position. It's been a decent ride, but lately, things have gotten a bit interesting. You see, our company recently hired this new manager. Let's just call him the cost cutter. From day one, it was clear he had one mission: to slash expenses wherever possible. Now, I'm all for efficiency, but this guy took it to a whole new level. His latest obsession? Paper. Yep, you heard that right. Paper. He was convinced we were hemorrhaging money on printing costs. So, one fine Monday morning, we all got this company-wide email. In it, the cost cutter announced a new policy requiring all printing to be double-sided with no exceptions. He even threatened consequences for anyone who didn't follow this rule. Most of us just shrugged it off. Double-sided printing for internal stuff? No big deal. But here's the thing. We deal with a lot of legal documents and client contracts. Sometimes these need to be single-sided. A few of us tried to explain this to the cost cutter, but he wasn't having it. I asked him about client contracts that require single-sided printing. His response was unyielding. He insisted that rules were rules, that double-sided printing saved money, and that we needed to stick to the policy. And that was that, or so we thought. Fast forward a couple of weeks, and we land this massive contract with Green Tech. It's huge, easily our biggest deal of the year. The paperwork arrives, and wouldn't you know it, there's a clear instruction. Please print single-sided for our legal department. I figured this was one of those times when common sense would prevail. So I walked into the cost cutter's office, contract in hand. I explained the situation with the Green Tech contract and their specific request for single-sided printing. I asked if we could make an exception in this case. The cost cutter's response was predictable. He reiterated the company policy, refusing to budge on the double-sided printing rule, even for this important client. I tried to argue, but he just waved me off. Fine, I thought. You want to play it that way? Let's play. I printed out all 80 pages of that contract, double-sided just like he wanted. I even made sure to use the eco-friendly setting on the printer for good measure. Then I shipped it off to Green Tech. 2 days later, the email came. It wasn't pretty. The Green Tech representative expressed their displeasure at receiving a double-sided printout when they had specifically requested single-sided printing for legal reasons. They demanded that we reprint and resend the contract immediately, warning that they might reconsider our partnership if we didn't comply. I'll admit I took a little too much pleasure in forwarding that email to the cost cutter. When I walked into his office this time, his face was red. I told him about Green Tech's dissatisfaction with the double-sided contract and their request for us to reprint it correctly. The cost cutter stammered, trying to defend the policy. I cut him off by relaying Green Tech's threat to pull out of the deal if we didn't fix this issue. I've never seen someone backpedal so fast. Suddenly, the sacred double-sided printing rule wasn't so ironclad anymore. We had to rush to reprint the entire contract, single-sided this time, and overnight it to Green Tech. The shipping fees alone probably wiped out any savings we'd made on paper in the last month. The cherry on top, the next day we got another company-wide email. In this one, the cost cutter announced a change to the printing policy. He said the double-sided printing rule would now be applied on a case-by-case basis, and we should use our judgment for client documents. It was a small victory, but a satisfying one. Sometimes you've got to let bad policies play out to their natural conclusion before people realize how ridiculous they are. I'm still here, still printing. And if the cost cutter comes up with any more brilliant money-saving schemes, well, I'll be ready to comply, maliciously, if necessary. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.